You're at a party, or maybe just wrapping up a big presentation at work. Someone comes up to you, smiling, and says, "That was fantastic. You did an amazing job." And without missing a beat, what do? You might get a little awkward, shrug, and say something like, "Oh, it was nothing," or "I just got lucky," or even point out a tiny flaw they didn't even notice. The kind words seem to just bounce off. They hang in the air for a second, then vanish. Later that day, though, a different colleague makes one small, critical comment. Just watch your pacing on slide 3 next time. And that sticks. That one little note plays on a loop in your head for the rest of the week. Why does praise feel like Teflon, while criticism feels like Velcro? Let's unpack that weird, universal reflex and make it make sense. This isn't you being ungrateful or insecure, not really. It's your brain running a very old, very powerful piece of software called the negativity bias. In simple terms, our brains are built to give more psychological weight to bad experiences than to good ones. It's not that the good doesn't count, it's just that the bad counts for more. Imagine a simple balance scale. If you place a 1-pound block of good stuff on one side, you don't need a 1-pound block of bad stuff to tip the scales. You need something that feels much, much heavier, even if it's objectively the same size. This bias is the invisible thumb on the scale of your daily experience, making one critique feel louder than 10 compliments. So why are we wired this way? The answer is a classic one: survival. Picture one of our early ancestors walking through the savannah. They have two things they could pay attention to. Over there, a bush of sweet, delicious berries. And in the other direction, a faint rustle in the tall grass that might be a predator. Missing out on the berries is a missed opportunity. Annoying, but not fatal. You'll find more food tomorrow. But missing the sign of a predator? That's game over. There is no tomorrow. Evolution is a game of passing on your genes, and the ancestors who were hyper-vigilant about threats were much more likely to survive and do just that. Their brains developed a smoke alarm that was deliberately set to be overly sensitive. It was better to have 100 false alarms, thinking a gust of wind was a lion, than to miss one real fire. We inherited that smoke alarm. In the modern brain, this plays out in our attention and memory systems. Your amygdala, a small almond-shaped region deep in your brain, acts like a threat tagging system. When you experience something negative, it gets a high-priority tag. Neuroscientists saw this in a clever study where they showed people a series of images, some positive, some neutral, some negative. Brain scans showed that the amygdala lit up most strongly for the negative pictures. And here's the kicker. The more it lit up when someone first saw a picture, the more likely they were to remember that specific picture weeks later. Your brain essentially takes a red highlighter to negative experiences and writes, "Save this, it's important," in the margins of your memory. It's a useful system for avoiding danger, but it can be a real headache in a performance review. This bias is so predictable, you can even put numbers on it. The psychologists Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky did just that with their Nobel Prize-winning work on prospect theory. They discovered something called loss aversion. In a huge range of financial decisions, they found that the pain of losing a certain amount of money is roughly twice as powerful as the pleasure of gaining the exact same amount. For many people, losing $100 feels as bad as gaining over $200 feels good. Think about that. You have to more than double the win just to break even emotionally with the loss. This explains why a small dip in the stock market can cause a citywide panic, while a steady gain barely makes the news. Our emotional response to loss is simply on a different scale. This imbalance shows up dramatically in our closest relationships. Researcher John Gottman and his team brought couples into their love lab and watched them discuss a point of conflict. For decades, they analyzed these interactions and found a surprisingly consistent pattern. The single best predictor of whether a couple would stay together and be happy was the ratio of positive to negative interactions during that conflict. The magic number wasn't 1-to-1, it was 5-to-1. For every 1 moment of criticism, contempt, or defensiveness, stable and happy couples had about 5 moments of affection, humor, support, or understanding. It's not that one snarky comment can be erased by 5 quick compliments. It's that the emotional bank account needs a thick cushion of goodwill to absorb the powerful impact of a single negative withdrawal. That's the negativity bias in action, right at your kitchen table. Okay, so if negative feedback is so potent, the solution must be to just pile on the praise, right? Not so fast. In one of the most surprising twists in psychology, researchers found that feedback, even positive feedback, can often do more harm than good. A massive analysis covering over 130 studies and almost 24,000 people found that in a shocking 38% of cases, feedback interventions actually made performance worse. Why? Because a lot of feedback, especially praise like, "You're a natural at this," shifts our attention away from the task and onto ourselves. Instead of thinking, "How can I improve this process?" we start thinking, "How am I being judged? Do I look smart?" This ego focus makes us brittle. We get so busy protecting our shiny new status as a natural that we stop taking the risks needed to actually get better. You see this perfectly in Carol Dweck's classic studies with school children. In one experiment, 5th graders were given a puzzle. Afterward, some were praised for their intelligence. "Wow, you must be so smart at this." Others were praised for their effort. "Wow, you must have worked really hard." Then they were offered a choice for their next task, a harder puzzle they could learn from, or an easy one they'd do well on. The majority of the kids praised for being smart chose the easy puzzle. They didn't want to risk their smart label. But the kids praised for effort? They overwhelmingly chose the harder puzzle. They saw challenges as opportunities, not threats to their identity. When praise focuses on an innate trait, it creates a fixed mindset. When it focuses on process, it builds a growth mindset. That's the difference between praise that builds confidence and praise that builds anxiety. There's one more reason praise can feel so slippery. Our brains are consistency-seeking machines. We build a story about who we are, our self-concept, and we prefer information that fits that story. This is called self-verification theory. If you have a deep-seated belief that you're not a great public speaker, and someone tells you your presentation was brilliant, it creates a cognitive clash. Part of your brain goes, "Wait, that doesn't match the data in my file." To resolve this conflict, it's often easier to dismiss the compliment as the person just being nice than it is to rewrite your entire internal file on yourself. This is why, paradoxically, a mild critique might feel more true and believable than glowing praise. Your brain isn't looking for what's most positive. It's looking for what's most familiar and consistent. So, we're wired to fixate on the negative. How do we fight back and actually let the good stuff land? The goal isn't to ignore criticism, but to give praise a fair hearing. First, when you get a compliment, resist the urge to deflect. Instead, get curious. Translate the vague praise into specific data. If someone says, "Great job," you can say, "Thank you so much. What part of it was most helpful for you?" This does two things. It forces them to give you a concrete detail, and that detail is something your brain can actually file away as evidence, not just fuzzy warmth. Second, actively collect the positive data. Keep a small notebook or a file on your computer, a wins log or evidence file. When you get that piece of specific, positive feedback, write it down. Just one sentence. "Sarah said the way I structured the intro made the whole proposal click for her." Doing this feels strange at first, but what you're really doing is building a new file for your self-verification system. You are deliberately gathering counter-evidence to the brain's negative default. Over time, you're not just logging wins. You are slowly, intentionally updating your map of yourself. And when you're giving praise, you can make it stickier and more effective for others. Use a simple formula. Mention the specific action and then name the positive impact. Instead of "great presentation," try "when you used that real-world example on slide 5, it cleared up the whole concept for me." This bypasses the ego protection reflex because it's not about them being a genius. It's about a specific, smart choice they made. It gives them a blueprint to repeat their success. It's praise their brain can actually use. Now, it's important to remember this isn't absolute. Negativity bias isn't a fixed law, it's a tendency. Your mood, your level of stress, and your personality can dial it up or down. And that 5-to-1 ratio? It's a research average from observation, not a magical formula for every argument. The quality and sincerity of the interaction always matter more than just hitting a number. These are patterns, not prisons. So the next time someone offers you a compliment, try to pause before you swat it away. See it not as a threat to your humility, but as a piece of data. Ask for a detail. Write it down. Let it sit for a moment. You're not being arrogant, you're simply choosing to balance the scales. You can still hear the critical note and learn from it. But by understanding the negativity bias, you give the positive notes a fighting chance to be heard too. You're choosing which evidence you pay attention to, and in the long run, that choice makes all the difference. If this deep dive into one of the mind's most powerful quirks helped things click for you, hit that subscribe button and stick around. We explore one cognitive quirk at a time to help make sense of the strange things our brains do every day. Thanks for watching, and take good care of your head.